most precious, sweetest than
As we continue through the second year of Jesus' ministry, the narrative immediately moves from one Sabbath controversy to another. Jesus had thoroughly answered the Pharisees' charge against his disciples for picking heads of grain on the Sabbath. Now in the synagogue, there's a man who is in need of Jesus' healing power. We'll begin with Luke chapter 6, verse 6, and end with verse 11, but bring in details from Matthew and Mark along the way. Luke chapter 6, verses 6 and 7. Now it happened on another Sabbath also that he entered the synagogue and taught, and a man was there whose right hand was withered. So the scribes and Pharisees watched him closely, whether he would heal on the Sabbath, that they might find an accusation against him. Now Luke is the only writer to mention that this happens on a different Sabbath than the grain field encounter, but soon after, probably the very next week. And this is likely the same group of Pharisees who challenged him the week before. The synagogue may be the one in Capernaum, where Jesus took up residence and often taught. And so Jesus has entered, as Matthew says, their synagogue. Now the man under consideration has a withered right hand, that is, dried up. And several scholars suggest this was not a birth defect or something he lived with a long time, but more likely the result of a recent disease or injury, perhaps a work-related accident. Some traditions say this man was a stonemason. I don't know if that's true, but it is highly probable he was at least a working man with a family to support. And so to have a hand withered, dried up, and unusable put him in a very difficult circumstance. The condition of his hand had no known cure at the time. So what the Pharisees are looking for is a miracle. They know Jesus can perform miracles. In fact, they're hoping he will. But not so they can witness his power, not to give God glory, not even for the benefit of the man. They don't really care about him. They want Jesus to miraculously heal the man so they can accuse him of breaking the Sabbath. This motivation shows the hardness of their hearts. Some think they themselves brought the man into the synagogue, planted him there for this very purpose. Whatever the case, they watch and wait. And more than that, Matthew chapter 12, verse 10 says, "And they asked him, saying, 'Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?' Again, that they might accuse him." Now the rabbis and scribes had disagreements even among themselves over what kind of medical attention could or could not be given on the Sabbath. Most gave allowance for urgent and life-threatening situations, but little else. And still they formulated tedious rules and loopholes to a completely absurd level. So their question is not a sincere effort to understand the law, but an attempt to force Jesus into an answer or an action they can use against him. While calling attention to the man and the law, they're not sincerely interested in either one. Luke 6, verse 8 says, "But he knew their thoughts, and said to the man who had the withered hand, 'Arise, step forward, and stand here.' And he arose and stood." Jesus knew they were only looking for a way to accuse him. And I suppose, knowing their motives were sinister, Jesus could have refused to answer them, simply healed the man and left. Instead, he turns the tables on them. He puts the man center stage, as if to say, okay, yes, let's consider this poor man's condition. Let's actually look at him and think through what is lawful. Verse 9, Then Jesus said to them, I will ask you one thing. Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil? To save life or to destroy? They had tried to corner Jesus with their question, a question based on twisted thinking and insincere motives, but Jesus corners them with a question of his own, based on the truth. When they asked, is it lawful to heal? They were in essence asking, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath? Jesus' question points out that if a need is presented and you have the ability to help, to avoid reaching out and helping isn't merely doing nothing, but doing evil. This principle is expressed in the law, as in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 1. You shall not see your brother's ox or his sheep going astray and hide yourself from them. You shall certainly bring them back to your brother. This was even expected to be done for one who hated you, as in Exodus chapter 23, verses 4 and 5. And Proverbs 3, verses 27 and 28 also says, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in the power of your hand to do so. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come back, and tomorrow I will give it, when you have it with you. So, which is lawful? To do good or to do evil? Well, clearly it's never lawful to do evil. That's a contradiction of terms. The answer is obvious and inescapable, but the Pharisees can't bring themselves to respond or give any answer. Mark says, but they kept silent. They refused to answer. But Jesus will go ahead and answer for them. Now, only Matthew records it, but Jesus gives an example to illustrate how absurd and inconsistent their stance is that they have taken. Matthew chapter 12, verses 11 and 12. Then he said to them, what man is there among you who has one sheep, and if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not lay hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value then is a man than a sheep? Therefore, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Now, in the course of time, there would be some rabbis who taught even against rescuing an animal on the Sabbath. But at this time, at least these scribes and Pharisees were among those who would lift a sheep out of a pit even on a Sabbath, whether they're willing to admit it or not. This was common decency, common sense. To do nothing, to abandon the sheep, even for one day, would be totally unnecessary and absurd. Well, how much more in the case of a human being, an image bearer of God who needs help? Now, of course, the Pharisees could not argue with his logic, but neither would they accept it and change their minds. Mark records in Mark 3, verse 5, and when he had looked around at them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. Jesus heals the man instantly, and it seems without even touching him, restoring muscle, tissue, blood flow, and strength to his hand. This is amazing and glorious to us and to the onlookers in the synagogue, but this meant something else to the Pharisees. Luke chapter 6, verse 11, with Mark 3, 6. But the Pharisees were filled with rage and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus, and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him. The Pharisees could not arrest him right there in the synagogue. He had just done a compassionate and miraculous deed, and everyone saw it. And this is part of the problem they have with Jesus. He's drawing attention away from them. Now, zeal for the law and the sanctity of the Sabbath is a mask they like to wear, but underneath that, their true motives are pride, jealousy, the love of power, influence, and money. Jesus, his teaching, his work, his influence, threatens their grip, their hold over the people, their hold on power. So, in jealous rage, they partner with the Herodians, a secular political group loyal to Herod. Now, the Herodians have little concern for matters of the law, but they probably see Jesus as a potential threat to their political stability. Normally, these two groups, the Pharisees and Herodians, would have nothing to do with each other, but they have this one thing in common. They want Jesus gone. Matthew records, "But when Jesus knew it, he withdrew from there." Matthew chapter 12, verse 15. Jesus distances himself from this brewing conspiracy, which was needful for him to continue his ministry. Well, this event completes the third of at least 6 Sabbath controversies recorded in the Gospels. And this is the second just in Matthew chapter 12. It appears very intentional for Matthew to place them here in his record, right after Jesus' words about true rest in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. There Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Only in service to Jesus the Christ is the true rest found, a true Sabbath rest for the people of God. Well, in our next study, Lord willing, we will follow Jesus as he continues giving rest to many troubled and afflicted people. Until then, have a great day, and may God be with you.